Development 2 LLC pertaining to the construction of an assisted living facility in the R3 zone, continued from September 13th. For any of you who were not here at the first hearing, we're in the middle of public comment. We will resume that. Everyone who would like to speak will get an opportunity to speak. We don't have any specific time limits. We just ask that you keep your comments germane to the issues that are in front of us. Once everyone, members of the public have had a chance to speak, then the applicant will have a rebuttal opportunity. When the applicant is finished with his rebuttal, then the public hearing will be closed and the matter will be taken under submission. With that, I will throw the mic open to whoever would like to be heard. Just ask that you say your name and address for the record.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today at this Commission's hearing. My name is Daron Lozier. My wife and I have been living in the Stratfield area of Fairfield for almost 30 years. The last 22 years on Bailey Road, which is pretty much around the corner from the property we're discussing, right up Argonne Street, about 2 blocks. While the synagogue has been an excellent neighbor for all these years, I do not have a problem. Indeed, I support the proposed usage of the property for an assisted living residence. As someone whose wife grew up in Fairfield, who owns a second home close by on Ridgeview Avenue in Stratfield that we inherited from my in-laws, and who raised our children in Fairfield, we hope that they will stay here to raise their children. I'm actually thankful that there will be an assisted living residence in this neighborhood so that we, God willing, one day, if the need should arise, and I hope that will not be for a long time to come, my wife and I could give our houses to our children and have the opportunity to stay close by to them and their families while living independently in such a residence. And we're thankful that we would not have to leave Fairfield where we've lived most of our lives. Given the aging population in Fairfield, I think that it is fantastic that this property will be developed for this use, and seeing the plans, the developers' plans on their website and as we saw at last week's hearing, for additional plantings and trees and the wetlands preservation and water conservation. I think that this use will only beautify the neighborhood and add to the value of the surrounding properties. This is in addition to being a good future source of tax revenue. So for these reasons, my family and I, as longtime Stratfield residents, appreciate Sunrise Senior Living's desire to invest in this property, and we look forward to welcoming them to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Good evening. I'm Linda Vaughn, and I live at 98 Argonne Street. If you aren't too familiar with it, it's the street that would come right next to the synagogue property. Since the move to Argonne Street in 1974, there have been repeated attempts to change the look of the neighborhood on Straphill Road, that stepchild section of Straphill Road between Fairfield Woods and the Merritt Parkway. We've been lucky that we've won all of the battles. It is still mostly residential. Last week, one of the representatives from Sunrise described our neighborhood as one in transition. I beg to differ. There has been no transition except for the demise of Stratfield Market. It is residential, it has been, and the only building that has gone in that is non-residential is Cambridge Manor. However, if Sunrise residence comes in, it will set a precedent, and you can be sure that the neighborhood will be in transition very soon after. For example, the 4 corners of Straphill Road and Fairfield Woods Road are zoned for 1-story buildings. If Sunrise goes in, it's a 3.5-story building. So when the property owners will again once come before the zoning board and ask for that zoning to be changed, how can you say you can't come in when there's this big wedding cake of a building right down the block? So I can foresee that this is going to be a problem for our neighborhood. As you know, Straphill is the most densely populated neighborhood in Fairfield. So if you stick in this big building in too small a space where there's inadequate parking, no matter what they tell you, there is not adequate parking. Argonne Street will be the overflow parking lot. You can be sure of that. Keep in mind, these assisted living facilities do not have doctors on staff. They do not have licensed nurses. They have people who go to Sunrise University, and these are the people who make minimum wage. They will be bussed in, according to one of the people here, from Bridgeport. These are the people upon whom the residents will depend on. The brunt will fall on them. You can be sure of that. Last week, one of you asked about Sunrise's business model, and the response was, with the aging population, there will always be a lineup of old people ready to move into these facilities. Well, I think there's a little bit more to look at than grannies in line ready to move into assisted living. Sunrise base fee is $9,000 a month. That's before expenses. That's before charges. If you want a bath, it goes up, approximately $200. If you want medication, medication is a lot higher because Sunrise, like most of these assisted living facilities, have ties to pharmaceutical companies. Granny gets the costs. If a patient runs out of money in assisted living, they go to the first available bed in a nursing home. I have a friend who was in assisted living at Watermark. She ran out of money. The only place that would take her in was a Jewish home. To my mind, it is the only healthcare facility in this area that has put humanity over profit. And what I would love to see in the same property is a satellite for the Jewish home. The new facility is already overburdened. We need something like that fits into the property, that is not going to dwarf the entire neighborhood, that has adequate housing, and that would be fine. I have no objection to assisted living going into that property, but to put something in that fits, not a big Marriott hotel in an aluminum siding neighborhood. I think Fairfield needs affordable housing for the elderly. We don't have enough of that. There's a long wait list. That would be a good use of the property. Of course, it doesn't bring in taxes. But I hope you will consider the possibility that something could go in that would benefit all of Fairfield and would not be detrimental to our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. This lady right here was next.
Hi, I'm Monique Sudikoff. I live about a third of a mile away. We've lived there for about 15 years, and I often walk in the neighborhood and take my kids to play at Owen Fish Park. And I'm in support of accepting the application. I think that the assisted living would make good neighbors. I did want to address one thing that came up last meeting that did concern me, and it was some of the comments about the business practices at Sunrise. And I have just one piece of information. It's one data point, but it was meaningful for me. I had the chance to talk to a new clergy member at our congregation who just came in from Long Island, and I mentioned Sunrise. He visits the elderly as part of his ministry very frequently. There are many Sunrise places in Long Island that he had visited, along with others, and his comments around Sunrise were only positive, that it was a wonderful place to visit, that he thought the people there were treated very well. And again, it's just one point of data, but it was meaningful for me, and I did want to share that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Sir?
Hi, my name is Mark Fishman. I'm 70 years old. I've lived in the Straphill area for 36 years. With my wife, Roz, who, by the way, was here last week. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Let me start again. My name is Mark Fishman. I'm 70 years old. I've lived in the Straphill area for 36 years. My wife Roz was here last week. She couldn't make it tonight because she had a prior engagement. She did send an email. I don't know whether you saw it. Oh, that's good.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you yes, we did. Thank you very much.
She's younger than I. She's 69. I recently reached the mandatory retirement age for partners in my law firm. I'm still practicing there, but when you reach a milestone like that, it makes you think about what's down the road. It's sort of a wake-up call, and you start to look down the road at lifestyle choices. We love our house, but there are headaches almost every week. And then the heat, snow removal, roofing, and painting cost a veritable fortune. The property taxes are now almost exactly 10 times what they were when we bought the house. That's a lot of money. We like Fairfield. We like Strapfield in particular. What are we going to do eventually, though? We don't know. But it is time to think, and it's good to have options, and this project is certainly an option. In fact, it's in a very nice location for almost anyone. For us, of course, there's a big familiarity factor of being so close to where we've lived for 36 years. For other people, both local people and people who might come from a little farther away, it's very nice that they can walk to the Exxon station on the corner, buy basic groceries, I mean very basic, coffee, newspapers, and of course lottery tickets. And that's, you know, that can brighten up the day of an older person until you finally get the results, of course. Looking ahead, really far down the road, I hope, Straphill Road, if this project is approved, can provide a continuum of care. Since you could be in the same neighborhood when you get to the point where you may have to go to a nursing home, and Cambridge Manor, of course, is just down the street. And that, I think, is an advantage. Switching to the aesthetics of this project, the assisted living facility, I think, will be a considerable upgrade in the appearance of the neighborhood. The synagogue building is now old and really hasn't kept pace with the times. It's somewhat, I guess I'd say, a white elephant. And it could be a lot worse if it were to close and be sitting there empty, which I think would be a disaster for the neighborhood, the same way Grand Central is. The house to the left of the synagogue, which is also, of course, part of this site, I think it's an eyesore, and at least with this project in place, it will be gone. The artist's rendering of the project is attractive. The building, at least, will be up to date and spiffy and nicely landscaped, none of which you have at the existing synagogue building. Someone last week said that the project is too big, but visually, it's not. Where it's going to be right next door to the ball field, you will see it and the ball field together in a single sweep of the eye. And the ball field visually will absorb whatever bulk the assisted living building may have. And I think they fit very well together. Having mentioned the ball field, I just want to say one other thing about that because it factors in another way. My wife and I often walk by it. We enjoy seeing the kids playing ball, and it's going on even into September. Last Saturday we saw them. It gives me personally a feeling of renewal to see kids playing baseball. And hopefully there'll be other septuagenarians who will experience it the same way and feel the same way about it. It makes me think that there's maybe even potential for multi-generational interaction between the assisted living facility and the activity going on in the ball field. In fact, something of that sort was part of the Jewish Homes Plan, where they try to find some way to expose the generations to each other. If nothing else, the residents can watch the kids playing ball and for half the year, and maybe even sit there and watch the game together with the other young families who are watching the game. And it could be a nice experience for everyone. And hopefully there'll even be some benefit for the kids if it's structured properly. I mean, I don't know Sunrise, but it would be nice if they'd sponsor one of the teams. And, you know, who knows, maybe they will. Finally, on a different point, there was a comment last week about traffic, and I'm not an expert on it. I think Sunrise addressed it, but what I can say is that the synagogue parking lot was full twice in the last 10 days, and I'm assuming there probably was even parking on the side streets. There was a luncheon on one of those days, there was a funeral on one of those days, and I really wonder if the assisted living facility could create any greater traffic than what you have in situations like that. So all things considered, I hope you'll consider approving the project and that you will approve it. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for devoting your time and effort to such matters.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other members of the public like to be heard?
I did.
I'm Howard Zuckerman. I've lived in this Straphill area, not far away, for almost 40 years. I think that I would certainly like to see this assisted living facility continue on. As mentioned earlier, I think it will be a better looking facility than the present synagogue, which is old looking. If you look at the synagogue, the left half of it is almost 3 stories as well. They're talking about this assisted living being 3 stories. The synagogue now, from what I understand, is down to less than 35 families. It will close. It will not stay open. You don't want another Straphill market to be in the same community sitting there empty with this going on. I think this would be a great addition to the community. I also am getting older, a little bit older than Mark, and will probably need assisted living at some time in the near future as well. I know the assisted living at the Jewish home has only 17 beds, filled up very rapidly. There is certainly a need in our community. So I think the people who are speaking against it are primarily from those with across the street and perhaps around the corner. But the bulk of the people in the Straphill area, I've spoken to a lot of them, really are in favor of this assisted living. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Bob Green. I live at 97 Argonne Street. It abuts the property. It's a little bit back from the main drag, and others are probably more impacted than I am. But I guess I do want to go on record as saying, as an impacted resident, I am supportive of the proposal. I think the mindful site plan and the manner in which the improvements are to be made to the property and the wetlands, and the thoughtful way in which the water flows that surround the property are to be managed. I mean, I admit, I presume that any sort of improvements have to comply with these sort of expectations anyway today, but I think when I look at the alternatives, I think the plan seems pretty robust. In terms of other updates and additions to the plan since we first saw the proposal, sidewalks, plantings, improvements to the aesthetics, I think clearly make an improvement over what's there now. And I'll say we've got, my wife and I have personal experience with Sunrise. Her grandmother had dementia, stayed at a Sunrise facility. This was in Illinois. Fantastic service and support she received while she was in their care. So, I think given the alternatives of what the property could be used for, this is a very good and probably better than many of the other viable alternatives. Now, with that said, I am concerned, given that I live on Argonne and I know the street is used for overflow parking today. I am a little concerned with the increased traffic, increased parking, especially on holidays, activity both during normal daylight working hours and hours that are, through all hours, I guess. What I understand is it's a 24-hour facility, so deliveries, pickups, that sort of stuff. I don't know if there's a way in which the Commission can negotiate either a covenant, a warrant, or some sort of promise that traffic and particularly during holidays and activity be minimized during non-working hours. I mean, even today, garbage pickup at the temple, I hear it, 5 or so in the morning when I'm waking up. Sometimes it's a little earlier than that. So, first-hand experience with that sort of problem. But overall, I guess weighing the pros and cons, net, this development is a better alternative than I think what we're currently faced with IGA and the abandoned facility there. So I would urge you to support the initiative and the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, my name is Lou Zeidler. I'm a homeowner of 35 years at 28 Little Island Drive, which is across the street from Owen Fish Park. I'm opposed to the Sunrise project. Many of my concerns have been addressed to the commission. Okay, I am not opposed to assisted living facility in my neighborhood if it wasn't for a 3-story building and set 50% closer to the road than the synagogue is now located on the property. Parking is an issue for me. The Jewish home on Park Avenue is having a huge problem with the lack of parking for visitors and employees. I don't want the overflow on my street or Owen Fish Park. This week's article in the Connecticut Post concerning the affordable housing complex in Westport, which is the RTM members seek to reverse affordable housing approval. I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs of that article. The four-story affordable housing complex recently approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on 1177 Post Road East will be reviewed by the representative town meeting after a petition was filed requesting the judgment overturned. The Greens Farm community has no concerns about affordable housing, and it understands that it welcomes it. However, my constituents feel as though the proposed 4-story structure is incompatible with the existing streetscape and therefore is not appropriate. Therefore, the 3-story Sunrise Assisted Living project is incompatible with our existing streetscape and therefore is not appropriate. Thank you for taking the time from listening to my concerns.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I want to begin by thanking members of the commission for giving me and the other members here the opportunity of speaking this evening. My name is Peter Tuckle. I live on Gulfview Terrace in the Straphill section of Fairfield. Unlike Attorney Fishman, though, I'm somewhat reluctant to disclose my age. As a long-term resident of Straphill section of Fairfield, I am, of course, concerned with the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I am very displeased by the current condition of the Straphill market. It's an eyesore. It's deplorable. I have looked at the renderings of the proposed assisted living site, the structures, the surroundings, and to me, they're very aesthetically pleasing. And as been mentioned beforehand, I think now, to speak very candidly, the renderings of the proposed site are much more aesthetically pleasant to the eye than the current exterior of the synagogue, and certainly the house that abuts Owen Fish Park. So I believe very strongly that the proposed site is going to elevate, is going to enhance the surroundings, going to enhance the beauty of the neighborhood, and therefore I'm very much in support of the project. Thank you again for permitting me the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for your time. My name is James Mccusker. I live at 7 Lola Street, kind of around the corner from Straphill Road. I have 2 parents that are both in assisted living facilities, one of them for dementia care for Alzheimer's. So I understand the benefit of an assisted living facility firsthand. I'm not here to necessarily argue with you about traffic or about the zoning issues or even the value of assisted living. I'm here to ask you to reconsider the proposal as it stands. I understand that it may be good for the town from a tax standpoint, but I just cannot reconcile the idea that you're going to drop something the size of a Hilton Garden Inn 75 feet from the road and tell me that it won't change the character of the neighborhood and that it won't change the property values in the neighborhood. I listened to the entire Sunrise proposal last week. I'm sorry, but there was some very creative thinking around that appraiser and how he came to his assumptions on how the value of the homes in the area would not be affected. There was nothing there that was really tangible that said, okay, and would at all put me at ease from a factual basis. Second of all, Sunrise says that they're a good neighbor. They say that they want to be a good neighbor. Let's take a look at two other developments that are going in the area right now, all right? There's the Jewish home on Park Avenue. They built that whole complex in conjunction with the neighborhood, including ball fields, a gym. All of that is able to be used by the neighborhood. As you alluded to before, they want interaction with the neighborhood. They want to be a good neighbor and they want to be part of the community. Let's look at the other one that's going in, the assisted living facility that's going in over at Mill Hill Terrace. They donated 13 acres of land so that it would not be ever developed for open space for the neighborhood. The square footage of that development is roughly the same square footage as what's going in or being proposed to go in at Straphill Road, roughly 68,000 square feet. They're doing it over 14 acres. They agreed to do it in a townhouse style so that it would keep in character with the neighborhood, and they donated all that land to the town. What is Sunrise bringing to the table for the community? A sidewalk. I'm sorry, that's just not enough. All right? How about, you talked about the park next to you. Have you made any attempt to say maybe we'll take over maintenance of the park? Maybe we'll upgrade the playground there. Maybe we'll rebuild the VFW, make it a community center. Do something. You want to be a good neighbor? Be a good neighbor. So coming in here and saying that you're going to drop a 68,000 foot facility on 3 acres of land, and all we get is a sidewalk and something to add to the tax roll, I'm sorry, that's not good enough for Fairfield, it's not good enough for Stratfield. So I'm urging you to ask them to reconsider, to make some changes to make it more in keeping with the neighborhood, and see if they can actually do something for our neighborhood instead of just throwing up our hands and saying, oh, well, that's it, it was zoned, so we're going to take it. We didn't do it at the other places, why should Stratfield be any different? And on a closing note, I kind of find it ironic that it seems like Stratfield once again is kind of being the canary in the coal mine from a Fairfield town TPZ standpoint, in that when the Stratfield market issue came up 10 years ago, that sparked new rules of neighborhood zoning laws so that the same issue that happened in Stratfield couldn't happen in Southport, couldn't happen in Greenfield Hill, because now there's neighborhood zoning laws that don't allow big chain stores in there. If you think what's happening at Stratfield isn't going to happen elsewhere, then I think we're all in for a rude awakening. There's going to be other churches and other facilities in town that are going to close, and they're already zoned for this use too. So I urge the board to maybe take a look at some of the laws around some of those pieces of land now, so that you won't have some of the issues that you're having now with what's taking place in our neighborhood. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Kate Corkin. I live at 42 Argonne Street, just adjacent to the synagogue property. I'm the second house up. I'm not on the side that's directly adjacent to the synagogue property, just across the street. I've lived in my home for 23 years. I'm opposed to the proposed development as proposed by SLD Development. I have been involved in attending meetings with SLD to discuss my concerns since the early spring of this year. I've been to every meeting. First, I am opposed to the size of the structure and its negative effects on the neighborhood character, daily life, and property value. The developer has been unwilling to consider reducing the size of the structure from 3 stories to 2 stories. I feel that the massing impact of 3 stories makes the structure institutional in appearance and impacts the residential neighborhood in a negative way. While the diagrams and architectural drawings we've seen are aesthetically pleasing, they're not aesthetically pleasing in the location where they want to put it. Second, traffic is a major issue on Straphill Road. While the developer's traffic study indicates that there won't be any further issues to traffic on Strapfill Road, the residents of Strapfill Road area and neighborhood side streets know the difficulty of navigating the roadway, know the safety issues. We also know what a densely populated area this is, how well used the sidewalks, the park, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. I really think, despite what the traffic experts said, that there is a significant risk to the neighborhood in terms of safety with a structure like that going in and the inherent traffic involved. Construction of the property is projected to take up the better part of 2 years, 16 to 18 months, 7 days per week, would be highly disruptive to the neighborhood through all of that time. Traffic, noise, activity, dangerous vehicles coming and going. I don't see how that can be justified at all for our neighborhood. Fifth, while the architect has spoken as, you know, that the structure will look like a Victorian home, and that will look very pleasing to the eye. If you go and stand across the street and think about what the structure is posed to look like, I can't imagine how anyone could agree with that. They talk about the screening of the landscaping and trees that they're planning to plant. Well, the structure is going to be at least 40 feet tall, with more added on because of what they have to do for all of the ventilation systems and things like that. The screening trees are, with the initial planting, are going to be 8 to 10 feet high. There's no way they're going to be screening a 40-foot structure from the neighborhood, and that's only along one side. The trees and landscaping across the front are flowering trees and are definitely not going to provide screening for the people who live directly across the street. My sixth concern, the developer has threatened the neighborhood at various times in the meetings that we've had with them. I don't find that a positive for the developer or for Sunrise, who plans to be the ultimate owner of the property. And it doesn't lead me to trust either of them. As far as the experts who looked at one Sunrise facility in Stamford and other assisted living facilities in other places, I found his report to be unconvincing. I did spend time researching Sunrise facilities in other locations in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. All of the places that I found were either located in commercial areas, like Black Rock Turnpike, where you've got a lot of commercial business going on, and or they were located in areas that far back, protected by woods and all kinds of large pieces of, I don't know exactly how big, but wooded areas that were really kept the facility out of any neighborhoods that were anywhere within a mile or so of it. We even spent time calling neighbors in some of the areas, and who basically said the same thing, that either they lived on a commercial roadway like Black Rock Turnpike, or that the facility was a mile or so away from where their actual property was because of the way place where it was built, like far back and away from the roadways and the neighborhoods. I want to finish and say that I love this area. I don't think looking at the proposed development of this property is really the same thing at all as what happened at the Strapfield Market property, though people here have associated it that way. But I don't know that an assisted living facility located there, and as big as it's going to be or proposed to be, is really appropriate for the location in view of what our neighborhood is with the park and residential area. That's my personal opinion, and I'm not a hired expert, but there you go. Thank you very much for hosting the neighborhood and to hear all of the concerns.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners, I'm Terry Augen Brown, former president of Congregation Navas Achim, a member of this community for 35 years, and I appreciate the emotional issue that is occurring around you. If you think it's emotional for people who live across the street, think of the 35 families who are the supporters of Congregation Navas Achim, who will see its building and its history from that was there since 1963 disappear. That's very emotional to us. I just have to define the issue as a marketing guy, because that's what I am. I'm a businessman. In 1963, 297 families, Hungarian families, moved from Bridgeport to Fairfield to build its synagogue. Those people were independent businessmen. Yes, there was a Judge Melitz who led the community there. Yes, there was a Dr. Isaacs. Yes, there were many people who were professionals because of the Park Avenue Hospital that was right here in our community. But there were independent businessmen who owned diners, who owned minor facilities, from butchers to bakeries. That was the community that they felt comfortable in, because Bridgeport Fairfield was the largest Hungarian community, Jewish and non-Jewish, in the United States in the 1920s. We met 5 years ago looking at our financial structure and decided we could not afford to be in this building. And we could not and would not allow it to fall apart and be dilapidated, because we didn't have the $2 million it took to refurbish the synagogue for now 35 families and let it look like the eyesore that the community created with Grand Central. We looked to leadership to find out what was best for the community. We had other offers. Other people who wanted to invest in building homes and causing more traffic, use of their dollars to support, to send their children to schools, which is a wonderful cause, but that would have really hurt the community. We as a congregation decided that this would be the best alternative and provide a beautiful facility. Now, we didn't know who we would go to, but we looked at a number of people and we made sure that what we were doing was within our executive committee of 12 people, what we thought was best for the community. We can no longer support ourselves in this building. We have to do something. We hope that this will benefit many of us who are turning of the age where we're giving up our big homes, we're moving into Dogwood or Strathmore, and hoping that someday we'll have a facility to go to. I just leave you with this. We had the community in mind when we set this plan and objective up. Whether the building is too tall and the shade trees aren't large enough, that's for the developers to figure out. We think it's the best use of this property for the total community. Thank you very much.
Are you normally I don't, we
Yes.
don't ask questions of the public, but so you are the president of
No
the
longer.
No longer.
I gave the mission over to two people, to Barbara Kaplan-Tuckle, who is here, and also to Elaine Schiller. That was after I did the study saying we could no longer afford being in this building. So they, no good deed goes unpunished. They made me head of strategic planning.
Right. And when did you step down from your post as president?
5 years ago. And I had been president for 7 years before that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I guess that was a perfect segue because I'm the current president of the congregation. My name is Barbara Tuckle. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I'm speaking now really in the role of as a long-term resident and as president of the congregation. We've been in the Stratfield area now for about 30 years, and currently we live on Golfview Terrace. I view the project as a needed enhancement. There's a growing senior population who would like to stay here. I also have personal experience. My mother was in Middlebrook Farms, and it was a long drive for me to get there almost every day. She then went into the Jewish home for the elderly after that, in nursing care. This project will allow those of us who want to stay active in the community and contribute to the community, because we love this community and we're not going anywhere, rather than having to drive and relocate. The plans for the project look very attractive. After last week's meeting, I actually went to see the Sunrise facility that now exists in Stamford, and I have to say that I would view it as understated, tasteful, and very attractive. This facility appears to follow that look and will upgrade our neighborhood. We love our synagogue, but anyone driving by our synagogue can see that it has seen better days, as well as the property next door. And this has been a long and painful decision, but we are not going anywhere. We're part of this group. We're not abandoning the neighborhood. We love the neighborhood very, very much. So in endorsing this plan, we're endorsing a plan that we will be a part of as neighbors to this plan. Finally, as a long-term resident, I view the small commercial area, including the coffee shop, the pizza restaurant, the bank, and the rehabilitation center up the other way, where I've also had experience with my family, as part of an overall very rich and attractive area, rich in the sense of it's diverse, with having a lot of homes of different sizes. And the neighborhood, including the houses, the park, the houses of worship, and the shops, fit well with this plan. An assisted living facility of this quality will fit right in with the look and the feel of our neighborhood. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Since you're the seller of the property, I have one question for you. The congregation? Yes, if you don't mind. Will the congregation continue on? Are you moving that to another location?
The congregation is actively planning to continue on and to be a good neighbor in this community. And since we, by our laws, have to walk to our house of worship
on the Sabbath, and on all holidays, we will be close by. We're not leaving. So this is a facility that we will be seeing very, very frequently. We'll be taking our own children, our grandchildren to that Owen Fish Park right next to that facility. We'll be integrated in, very much so. We are planning to build in close proximity as well.
I see. So the congregation is planning to find another space to build a new temple. Got it.
Did you look at the IGA building?
There's a great market over there.
Can you get a good deal for us?
Thank you.
You need
Thanks.
an intervention
Thanks.
from God, I think is what it boils down to, a big intervention.
Is there any other member of the public that wishes to be heard?
My name is Sarah Klein. I am part of the executive board of the synagogue about which we are speaking. I probably at this point am the oldest active member in the congregation, and I certainly do support the plans that Mr. Oakenbrown just mentioned. My parents were part of the great Hungarian movement from Bridgeport to Fairfield, and I was there that day when we broke ground. I am sorry that we have to give up our facility, but I also, as you heard, know what's happening. We can't afford it. But we do want to stay here. I am close by. I live in the Dogwood condos, and at my age and my husband's age, we certainly are considering an assisted living in the future. And I'd like to stick around here. My family is here and a lot of my friends. So I urge the commission to accept the application for the assisted living. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good. You're next.
Good evening. Thanks as always for your patience and your diligence. My name is Bud Morton. I live on Sasko Hill Road. I'm clearly not an expert on all of the relevant matters that apply to this, but I have done some homework. I have visited the site. I listened carefully to all of the concerns that have been expressed by local residents. I met with the developer more than once. And after earlier speakers expressed some concern about negative comments on the internet, I did my own internet search. What I found on the internet was that Sunrise is highly rated as an operator of assisted living facilities and memory care. Granted, there are some complaints there, but that seems inevitable for an operator that has over 300 different communities, 30,000 or so residents, and 30,000 employees. Believe it or not, I even have complaints at home. And I live alone. All things considered, I strongly support the proposed facility, particularly because Fairfield's tax base has been declining. It's down 2% this year from last year after the most recent revaluation, and it's down 10% from the peak in 2011. So we need as much responsible and appropriate commercial property development as possible to relieve the pressure and the burden on residential property owners. So subject to addressing any responsible neighborhood concerns about public safety and aesthetics, it seems to me that this project meets both the standard of responsible and appropriate, and I believe it's in compliance with all our zoning regulations. In addition, as others have noted, we should always be mindful that the most likely alternative uses of a site like this one could have much more negative effects on the community, such as a high-density multifamily residential development. In contrast, based on its well-established reputation, Sunrise seems to be a very good neighbor and a good operator. And 40% of this property is going to be dedicated to a perpetual conservation easement. One further positive consideration, in my opinion, is that this senior living facility will add to the continuity of care infrastructure that will be needed if the town decides to create a center of excellence in senior living as part of its strategic plan. So for all these reasons, I hope that the TPZ will approve this very good project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ron Roberts, and I live at 1611 Straphill Road. I own the property that directly is next door to the synagogue, and I have 156 feet of frontage with them, and they've been my neighbor. Excuse me. See, I'm not a professional at this. I'm just a guy who lives in the neighborhood and pay my taxes and want to preserve the neighborhood that I moved into 21 years ago. I can't claim I've lived here 35 years, but have lived in that house right next door to my neighbors for 11 years. And I do have to say that one of the reasons that I thought that was a good house to buy was because I had the best neighbors that you could possibly have. The side of the property that adjoins my house is, and I'm thankful for the way they designed it years ago, that they put the parking lot and the driveway as far away from my house and the other houses as possible. So it's like I have no neighbor. It's like woods, and so I have complete privacy on my half acre, and that's something that's really important to me. So I'm off script here. So I want to thank the commission for hearing all this. And I'd just like to ask the commission and my community to bear with me, because I have several things I want to cover. I've gone to a lot of their meetings. I've listened to all their proposals, and I listened last week to everything. So I want to acknowledge, and I think somebody's already acknowledged, that this is a really highly charged and emotional issue, because it involves not only our properties where we live, but it involves and I thank the gentleman who is obviously the elder of his community for what he just spoke about, their legacy coming from Hungary, building that temple, being here for so many years, wanting to stay here, loving our community. And actually, you know, I wasn't thinking of that when I prepared. So that's one of the charged issues. I mean, they're my neighbors. I love them. I didn't interact with them. I'm not of the same religious faith, but however, I am of a religious faith that has great respect for this group. And it's hard to see them go. It really is. And I'm not in their shoes. I'm not giving up what they're giving up, but I can see that it's a lot. So but the other thing that's highly charged about this whole issue is that it involves what I believe is our most precious and treasured natural resource, and that's the oldest and wisest among us. And my parents are past, but whenever I see an elderly person, I miss my parents. And so the thing about this issue is that I think it's possible that people could maybe want to speak up about it, but are afraid to because they might think that, they don't want senior citizens in their neighborhood, and that could not be farther from the truth. I think the biggest objections are what you've heard is really the fact that the building's 3 stories. That's probably the biggest thing. And so I also want to compliment the Sunrise team on their presentations. They're obviously, you know, honestly highly paid professionals. This is what they do for a living. I don't do this for a living. I do IT in a bank for a living. And by the way, I happen to be on a committee at the bank I work at that is working on protections for vulnerable adults. So I'm aware of the subject, but me, I don't do this for a living. I have to do other stuff, and I don't have time to prepare all this and come here. I'd rather be home, you know, on my couch or something than be here. This is not fun for me. So I'd like to ask, what is the special exception that has to be granted? Does anybody know exactly what it is that is the special exception?
So we normally don't interact, like have a question and answer period during this time, but, you know, the special exception is a list of permitted uses in the zone for which we have to have a public hearing and you know, receive all viewpoints. Mm-hmm. And then there are a list of criteria that we have to evaluate the application on. Whether there will be an undue burden on traffic, for example, safety issues and the like. And so just to be clear, it is a permitted use in the zone. And so within that context, there are certain criteria that we evaluate to either accept it or reject it or accept it with conditions.
Well, the thing that has really struck me is that this is the first and only proposal that's been brought forth. It is a prime piece of real estate in probably, arguably one of the best towns, maybe in all of, considering schools, stability and all that, probably one of the best towns maybe in all New England to live in. I don't understand why there's all this fear about what the alternatives could be. Why are we so afraid of what else might go there? I mean, my point is, it seems like there's a given consensus that even in their own property values study, they admitted there are no comparables, and really it's all about the possible downside risk. I mean, a few people have mentioned maybe there's an upside risk, but I think it's pretty obvious that there's much more of a downside risk than an upside risk. So let's say it was sold to a developer who built high-quality single-family homes or townhomes. I mean, there's no way there would be no downside on our property values. It would almost guarantee an upside. So why are we going immediately, the first proposal, with the solution, the use of the property that has only potential downside to our property values? Can anybody answer that question? Why? I mean, surely this is a prime piece of real estate. You guys are in this business. They're in this business. There's probably real estate agents here in the audience that are in this business. Everybody knows there's developers, contractors waiting in line to get a chance to buy this property and do what they want with it. Why is it only going to this use? And nothing else is being considered. Townhomes, something that would almost guarantee either stability or upside in property values. I have to say, what they're proposing, when I look at that building, I look at pictures of that building, it looks like something you would see on Northern Boulevard in Queens. It's with the thing over the front, it's either, I'm 57 years old, I've been around, I've seen a lot of buildings, it looks either like a hotel, or it looks like an apartment complex in a very urban area, or in an area that maybe is not yet developed, but an area that's targeted for heavy development. Or it looks like a catering hall. That's what it looks like to me. Look, I didn't ask for this. I moved to Fairfield because Fairfield is like, it's the place where you go where you don't have to worry. You buy in Fairfield, you're set. It's only going to go up. There's no risk. I mean, that's why I took out a mortgage for a $500,000 home, to live in a town that is golden. So, and I mind my own business, paid my taxes, which have doubled over the last 10 years, paid my homeowner's insurance, which has doubled since Hurricane Sandy. Why am I being put at this risk? And why is no other use of this property being considered? And that's not even to mention that the division that this is creating in this neighborhood. I sent out some emails expressing my opinion. We developed like an email chain. And some people replied to me only because they were afraid of what other people on the email list might think of them. Why do we have this now in our community? We don't need this. There are uses of this land that nobody would object to. That would generate tax revenue. And there are places that a very needed facility for Sunrise could go to that nobody would object to them going. So we're talking about putting them where there's some that are for it, but there's some that are very against it. So why are we doing this? You know, I went on the website today to get the email address. And the homepage of the Fairfield, if everybody can see this, I've got more copies of it. The homepage, it says, "Welcome to Fairfield." Fairfield is a charming, thriving town featuring 5 miles of shoreline on Long Island Sound. Fairfield has more than 59,000 residents, but maintains a small town feeling, diverse neighborhoods with their own character and flair. So where is the character in Strapfield of this building? Where's that character? There's no other building like that. That's not the character of our neighborhood. It's clearly changing, and basically what it's doing is it's a big corporation with enough money and enough muscle coming in and offering a large sum of money to chisel out a place in the middle of us and build this big thing that changes our character. So this isn't preserving the character of our neighborhood. This is changing it. So if this gets approved, you should change this on the homepage. You know, me going up against them is like a little leaguer versus Tom Seaver. They do this for a living. I don't do this for a living. And I just think that another use should be considered and studied and proposed, and this one should be delayed or cut down to 2 stories. And another comment about the vacant building on the corner. I don't understand how anybody is tying that to this property. It's completely unrelated. I don't know all the facts, I'm not in the business, but from what I heard is that the buyer of that property, the attorney for the buyer of that property, failed to put in a contingency clause that they would get out of the sale. So they're locked into this thing for however many years and paying it. That has nothing to do with this. There's nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with this at all. It's completely unrelated. And if it was approved, you would have a quarter of the residents of Easton coming down, because they have nothing. They'd be coming down Straphill Road to go to that Walgreens. So, I mean, the fact that that happened and why nobody can do anything about it, why the town can't force somebody to do something with it, I don't know anything about this, but I don't see how in the world it's related to the synagogue property. And I don't see why in the world we would be afraid of this prime parcel of land would be misused by developing single-family homes, which should have no risk. And so the other thing I wanted to ask about is So we're talking about this Sunrise Senior Living as a resource that we need places to go. Well, maybe one reason I don't feel so strongly about it is because I could never afford this. I mean, it's, from what I've heard, it's at least $9,000 a month. So my question is about this business model. I mean, we're all excited, it's great, it's beautiful, they take good care, but so $9,000 a month. After 5 years, that's $540,000. So who goes to Sunrise Senior Living, moves in there, and knows how much longer they have to live, and knows they have enough money in the bank to pay for this? And what happens when their money runs out? Where do they go? After 10 years, over $1 million. I'm never going to live in a place like this. I don't understand how anybody can afford it. I mean, I guess people are better at saving money than I am, but to me, it's just fantasy. After 12 years, $1.3 million to live there. So who has that much money in the bank, and who knows how much longer they're going to live? If this place is so wonderful for them and they thrive there, well then surely it makes them live longer. How can they afford it, and where do they go? Do they get kicked out? Do they go somewhere where the taxpayers and Social Security then have to pay for them after Sunrise has taken all their assets and their children were deprived of getting any inheritance because all the money went to them? I'm sorry, I'm just against it. My mother had to go to rehabilitation and assisted living for a little while, and you know, the government had to help pay for it. It's like, and whatever money that might have been gotten from the sale of our family homes, all went to them, and there was nothing for us. So as a business model, I understand there are patients with dementia and that need to be cared for. And my heart is broken for those people that have that in their family, and I don't pretend to know what it's like. There's been comments made about the lighting, that because of Sunrise, we're going to be able to see the stars at night. I mean, some of the arguments for it have just been flippant and not sound. And there's going to be delivery trucks. On the traffic study, they said all the employees, it's got to have at least a half a dozen, 2 dozen, who knows how many employees on site at once. They said they're going to use mass transit to get there. There is no mass transit. So, I mean, doesn't anybody see these studies that they've done? They've been paid a lot of money. You can do a study to make anything look good. Their traffic study conveniently omitted 2 really bad accidents right on that stretch, right in front of that location. One I witnessed, it might have been in 2012 or 2013, right before their chart. So their chart said 0. But I witnessed a horrific accident where both cars were completely totaled because somebody was backing out of their driveway. Mind you, Straphill Road is a residential road. There's people that live right on it, and their driveways are right on it. So they have a choice. Either when they come home at night, either they try and stop traffic and back in their driveway so that when they come out, it's safer, they're pulling straight out. Or they take the risk of they have to back out onto it, which is also highly dangerous, and how one of these accidents happened. So I think the traffic study completely omitted the fact that there's a lot of homes with their driveways right on that, and it's very dangerous for them to get in and out, as it is now, without any increase. They also completely omitted the fact that on weekend mornings, traffic is already backing up from the mobile station. It's already backing up all the way to Owen Fish. And on Fairfield Woods Road, in weekday and business mornings, the commute mornings, it's backing up all the way from Lockwood to Morehouse Highway. So it takes 15 minutes to go a half a mile. And that's before we have 120 more residents, however many dozen new employees, delivery trucks, and all the traffic out of there. I think single-family homes would be a lot less traffic. I think they would offer assurance that property values would only go up, and there would be no downside. And I think there's a place for Sunrise Senior Living, and if they could make their project two-family, then if anybody's property values goes down, it affects them all. So put yourself in a situation where you're a new home buyer, and you come in and you're looking at my home or my neighbor Matt's home. They're on the market, and it's a family with maybe young children, and they like everything about it. Nice little backyard, all things, and then they look up, and there's a 3-story building with windows right there overlooking the property. And then they find out that it's the Alzheimer's ward. So one of my main concerns that I voiced to the developers, Mr. Kroskin and Mr. Deepakol, was that I am concerned about losing my privacy. And I said, no matter how those trees going to grow tall enough to block 3-story windows? And their response was basically, well, the people on that floor, it doesn't matter if they see in your yard. And nobody else seemed to catch it or responded to it, but to me, that didn't make me feel better about privacy. To me, privacy is no human beings seeing on my property, and I don't think there's anything less about people that have Alzheimer's. And I think it's inevitable that maybe not the entire community, maybe for the people on Louvain and the other side streets that are a little farther away, it may not have any impact on their property values. But I think the people right around it, it could have a big impact on our property values, or it could change it. Certainly the looks of it change it. It's just, there's nothing like it there. The church, the Presbyterian church is not 3 stories. The Strathmore condominiums, they're not there's no big 3-story buildings. Any 3-story buildings are individual residences. So I would just like to ask the committee and the sellers to consider a different use of this property, and may their legacy not be a division in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
Jan Reber, Beaumont Street. I'll be very brief. I don't live in the neighborhood, but like many other Fairfielders, I often visit this part of town. Sunrise seems to be the type of institution that will fit well in this area. In some ways, this application is simply replacing one institution with another. The benefits of increasing our commercial tax base and the local economic activity this facility will generate are very attractive aspects of the application. I'm the son of a 92-year-old mother who lives in a similar facility. It's a 3-hour drive from here. It seems likely that many Fairfield residents like me would recognize Sunrise as a welcome service for our town. I do think, though, that it's always important to carefully consider the views of neighbors in balance with town-wide interests. The neighbors have identified 2 issues that I believe deserve consideration. First, the concern about on-site parking. While the application meets minimum requirements, there are impinging factors. The applicant claims that some employees will arrive via shuttle from mass transportation pickup. However, there's no assurance of how many, if any, employees will arrive that way. Facilities such as this one also have periods of high traffic for which the proposed number of parking places may not be adequate. As one of the first speakers last time, Vinnie, mentioned, holidays and shift changes constrain parking. I see that at my mother's place. I see it at Cambridge. At these locations, in addition to holidays, special events like birthdays, like wedding parties where involving future in-laws visiting a grandmother who can't attend a wedding, memorial services, etc., cause overflow traffic during the week. It's human nature for drivers seeing a full parking lot to seek the nearest legal parking. In this case, that would be the streets or Owen Fish Park. I understand from the developer that in its rebuttal, Sunrise is going to propose controlled off-street parking for employees, off-site parking for employees during special event times. Maybe that's a solution, perhaps it's a partial solution. I hope you'll consider at least some additional parking places as a condition of approval. Second, screening is a concern, especially for neighbors across the street. While the neighbors already face an institution, the larger size of the Sunrise building creates the need for substantial street screening. The architect took a very useful approach to minimize the perception of building size and to hide parking areas, but you might consider a condition of approval that requires mature evergreen screening along the front of the property to replace the proposed deciduous trees, and in sufficient number to provide year-round screening. Here again, Sunrise and its developer have heard local concerns, and I think they're going to offer some sort of modification and rebuttal. I hope it's a robust solution. This developer and this operator appear to be reputable, and they're presenting a project that's compatible with the existing intermingling of residences and institutions in this general area. Sunrise wants to be an asset to the neighborhood and to the town at large. In fact, Sunrise needs goodwill to make its financial model work. With some modifications and perhaps some conditions of approval, Sunrise and Fairfield should find a mutually acceptable way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wish to be heard? Going once, going twice. Okay. Attorney Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, could we take a 5-minute break? It'll enable us to tighten up the rebuttal, make it hopefully...
We can. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes. I'll call the meeting back to order. So, Mr. Fitzpatrick, we had one latecomer from the public, okay? Very good. So, we'll throw it back open to public comment, and we have someone who came in late.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I appreciate you letting me speak.
No need to apologize. Happy to be able to do it.
Thank you. I'm Pam Dix, and I own 604 Straphill Road, right across from Assumption Church. We just had the big carnival and all the traffic and all the hoo-ha. I've also had 3 accidents in my front yard. My neighbors hit their house. 2 hit my tree, hit my pole, and my kids' cars parked out front. At the last carnival, at the end of the night, somebody plowed into them. There was a woman killed crossing the street, going to the church further down. My dogs were hit, almost lost them. $1,000, $1,000,000 later. The property value, I mean, that being said, the traffic is horrible. The property values will just completely go down. To put, when I saw the elevation of the building, it does look like a Marriott. I don't think any of you would want that in your backyard, up your street. They're turning Straphill Road into a commercial highway. We have so many other places in Fairfield. Look at Old Kings Highway. So desperately needs renovation. They just put a Walgreens there. That looks better. It was in the Brown building. All the, all the dilapidated buildings and empty lease, signs for lease on that street. Put it there. It looks commercial. It would be wonderful near the Stop and Shop. People can walk across the street and shop. The elderly, if they actually go out of the building. I just feel that it doesn't fit our neighborhood. It's extremely too big. None of you would want it in your neighborhood or in your backyard, I would imagine. The tax revenue is going to be not lowering our taxes. First of all, our property values will go down. Our tax base isn't going to go down. I know we need it, but there's so many other places to put it. It's too big, and I would be shocked if you let it go through. And the minimum, make it 2 stories and much smaller. Look what happens on Park Avenue near Sacred Heart University. In Bridgeport, Hospital bought part of that church. And now they have a 3-story parking garage smacked up against all those homes, and all their properties went down by hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're all moving out and putting the college kids in. Because they literally, from here to that screen, is a 3-story parking garage. It's horrible. So you guys are here to protect our neighborhoods, our property value, our children. All these kids walk to school. There's Unclewood, there's the church Assumption has its school. It's a highly traveled pedestrian street. I think actually the speed limit should be lowered, but to put in this huge thing that's going to cause traffic to increase, I can't believe that you guys would let that go through. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you for your comments. So with that, I'll close public comment and turn it back to the applicant for a rebuttal.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, for the record, my name is Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frayne, Bologna. Our offices are at 1735 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing the applicant, SLD Development, the contract purchaser of this property at 1537 and 1571 Stratfield, subject to the special exception application before you tonight. At this point, I would like to introduce several speakers to address the substantive issues which have been raised by the Commission and the public during the course of the public hearing. Irresponsible comments will be ignored. At this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Philip Kroskin, the Senior Vice President for Sunrise Senior Living. Philip.
Good evening. Again, my name is Philip Kroskin. I'm with Sunrise Senior Living, and I would thank you all for hearing. I also want to thank the members of the community that came out. I've been in the real estate business my whole life. Frankly, before this, I used to build shopping centers, which were much more contentious, I thought. I know that this is an emotional issue on everybody's part. We feel like we've tried to hear all the concerns and complaints, and many are legitimate, and we feel like we have tried diligently to address those concerns and complaints, recognizing each and everybody's opinion as being valid. Sunrise is a care-based company, and as such, our job as real estate people is to ensure that that care and that reputation begins day one. Speaking of the reputation, I think it's been addressed once before, but it goes unsaid, I'm sure, that internet research can be very flawed. I'm very proud of my company, extremely proud. I see on a daily basis the way our employees en masse care for our residents. I see the thousands of letters that our CEO gets thanking him from family members. Most importantly, we're a 35-year-old company that has managed to stay in business for that long by creating a culture of care and well-being. We have more than 30,000 residents and more than 90% occupancy, and we're growing. And we're locally based, meaning that each and every community serves a 5 and 10 mile ring. If we were such a poorly run company, we clearly would not be able to stay in business. I'm going to address some of the points that came up outside of that. Construction. Our construction is compliant with all the regulations of time to construct and of noise relative to construction. We are only 6 days a week, not 7. And it's, yes, a 14 to 16 month time frame, of which about 8 months is outside activity. Then we go inside. We're very good about constructing in neighborhoods. Our buildings are built in neighborhoods because this is where our residents want to be. And so therefore, noise complaints are a major problem that we want to avoid. We have project managers on site to deal with them should they exist. We have truck washdowns to ensure that the dirt and dust doesn't get into the neighbors' yards and their houses, and we consistently work with them along the way. As for being built in residential neighborhoods, Sunrise is building a home. It's a community for residents who are, in this case, the citizens of Fairfield. And those residents don't want to be in a shopping center commercial location. And that's why our business is successful, because we build them in residential neighborhoods where they can go to, where they've been and where they've lived. At the end of my presentation, I'll hand you 8 such examples just in the Northeast of buildings that are sitting right in residential locations very similar to this. I could pick out many, many, many more. Our buildings are residentially designed and are intended to integrate beautifully into their communities, and they do. By fact, they do. We have 315 of them. I've seen most of them, and it's such a pleasure to drive up to them. As far as a commentary about late night care and nurses and ambulances, we do have 24-hour nursing. It's not just our care managers. We provide some form of a licensed practitioner nurse or a full registered nurse at the building at all times in the event of some sort of emergency that is needed to be handled. This, in fact, reduces the incidence of ambulances that come to our communities. We've caucused the local fire departments here as well as elsewhere, and we've caucused many of our communities locally. Our average number of ambulances coming to our communities are between 5 and 7 a month, not skilled nursing numbers, 5 and 7 a month. And in fact, considering the proximity of the residents that would be coming to us, we're typically pulling ambulances out of neighborhoods and reducing the ambulances because they're coming to our communities. 5 and 7 a month. As far as employee shifts and traffic, our employee shift changes are between 6:30 and 7 and between 2:30 and 3. Our typical shift in the morning hours is 25 employees. We flex our staff based upon occupancy a little bit here and a little bit there. Our afternoon shift is about 15, and our evening shift is about 4.
When is the evening shift change?
Excuse me, I want to say 7. I didn't add in 3, 9 maybe? No. Yeah, I think 9. 9 or 10. 9 or 10 o'clock. No, I think it's 11. Wait, 3. 11, thank you. I was only thinking about the midday because I was thinking about traffic. Yeah, 11.
Yeah.
11.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
11.
It's an 8-hour shift.
right. And the overnight is how many employees?
About 4, depending again on the flex of need, but generally it's about 4. As far as parking, so the employee shift change should not stress in parking. We're talking a half-hour overlap of, at most, 25 employees to 15 employees, considering, again, we do experience after, we have 30,000 plus employees too, and we've done it for so long. About 50% of our employees do find a way to get to the community either through sharing ride or mass transit. And we are in communities that don't have a train station in front of us and don't have a bus station in front of us. That's why we have our vans and our cars to help shuttle and ensure that our employees get into the community.
Will you run a shuttle van
Yeah.
to the bus stop or the train station?
Absolutely.
On the shift changes? Yeah.
Absolutely we do. We need to get our employees to work.
Mhm.
So if that's the only way we can get them to work, that's what we do. It's consistent throughout the Northeast and throughout the country. We absolutely run the shuttle. And to that end, as far as parking, in fact, this property is parked at a larger ratio per unit than pretty much all of our other properties. This is at a 0.6 ratio. All of our other properties are much lower than this, having 50 parking spaces for 83 units. I mean, typically we're at about 45 parking spaces for 85 units. And we have many, many, many examples that I can provide of that as well. However, with that being said, it is a legitimate concern that there are days that the parking lot may be filled. That's a legitimate concern, and we're very familiar with that concern. It's uncommon, 4, 5, 6 times a year at most. I, again, spoke with my head of operations in the Northeast just to make sure my numbers are correct before I came in here. We absolutely are used to dealing with to ensure that our neighborhood residents are not impacted. And to do that, we ask our employees to park elsewhere if they are driving, and we will shuttle all those employees in, freeing up the parking lot. We ask our family members in advance of an event, if the parking lot is full, we will shuttle you from a specific location. In this case, we happen to have satellite parking lots right near the site. We also have plenty of churches and schools and many other places that we could offer for our employees and our family members to park. We're very good.
Have you investigated those alternatives for this location?
Absolutely. The satellite lots that the state has, the park and ride lots, they absolutely should be and can be used by our employees, and we would encourage our employees to use those satellite lots.
Yeah. So I think there's a park and ride that's up near the Merritt
Yes.
entrance, right?
Mhm.
Up on Black Rock Turnpike. Have you been in touch with any of the local churches to see if there are arrangements that can be made?
I haven't specifically, Mark, have you specifically spoken? It's not, we've just not found an issue. Most of the times we're in touch with local churches and synagogues anyway, and elementary schools, simply because we have an outreach program for intergenerational events and volunteerism. So we have that ongoing relationship with those entities that are close by. So for us to call them and say, hey, we have an event coming up. Oh yeah, we know the event's coming up. We're sending some people over to volunteer. Do you mind if we use your parking lot? It's just it's a natural course of our business.
Okay. And so the shuttle service that you're talking about is an amenity that is planned, is part of the plan to be afforded in the ordinary course. If there is a park situation, somebody needs to park off-site, they can call the shuttle, and that's available all the time?
Yeah, not just call the shuttle. So first of all, let's explain. We have a 12x2 bus that we buy right at the beginning, and in some cases we have another a town car that we have that's on site for our residents because it's part of their activities. They like to go to places as well as doctor's appointments. So for us to say to a family member when we have an invitation, do not park in these other neighborhoods. If you find that the parking lot is full, we will be running a shuttle every 5 minutes from this specific location. Please park in that location. Additionally, we keep staff up front. If we see people sort of walking in off the side streets, they're very used to saying, ma'am, can you please go park in the lot? We'll come pick you up. One comment about value. It's not worth commenting on pricing. It's inaccurate. However, Sunrise is very confident that we provide a significant value to those families that utilize our service. And the families are very happy with that value that we offer them. Most importantly, just so that you know, our average stay is only about 2 years. So we find that most of our residents pretty much exclusively have the ability to afford this through home equity, family, other issues, and we work diligently with families not to exit. We are the opposite of that type of company. Frankly, we have the ability to allow a resident to age in place, unlike many, many other assisted living providers. If you need, for example, a two-person lift, Sunrise has the ability to allow you to stay in the community and want you to stay there. We work with hospice. If a family's finances start to get stretched, we have many different ways to help them in terms of that. So Sunrise is very cognizant about preserving the dignity of life. It's not about the money. It's about preserving their dignity of life all the way through life. I think that touches on my elements. And where would you like me to? Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Landcor, Principal of Dymer Civil Engineering and Surveying of South Barry.
Thank you, Bill. It's going to take about 2 seconds, hopefully. There was a question that was raised with regards to the fence along the park side in terms of having some details. So I've got some handouts here that will actually give you what that fence would look like. Okay.
Thanks.
And then last, there was a question that was raised through an email with regards to the sidewalk along Straphill Road. That sidewalk originally was shown as bituminous. It will be 5-foot concrete walk with same for the apron that crosses the driveway itself.
Okay. So, question for you.
Sure.
So on the site plan, there was a that area where we talked about the fire truck could come onto the grass.
Right.
Around the back, go all the way around the parking lot.
Right.
And there was that opening where I identified that there were some trees on the landscaping plan, and we said,
Right.
well, we'll have to see about that.
Right.
I noticed that that's also where the dumpster.
Well,
located.
there's the dumpster, and then there's area around it that's on the, you have a sidewalk that is to one side as well.
Yeah.
Those areas can be provided with what we call mountable curbing to allow for that area if it had to be. When we met with the fire marshal, their idea in terms of having access to the back, they had more than ample, in their view, of having room for the fire truck. But again, the question came up at the last meeting, if we had to move it further, then we have the ability to be providing space to allow for a truck to pass through that area. I agree that there's the trees on one side. Those trees would have to be either relocated or moved off. The dumpster can also be shifted to one side or the other if we needed to actually grab a little bit more room.
Yeah, so I was actually looking at the back lot, and there's a similar kind of cutout. I don't know if you want to take a look at this. Maybe you can get a copy. It's a planning plan. So in the back lot there where the fire truck was shown to be able to do a K-turn, yeah. So moving the dumpster to the back of the back lot there, yes, exactly. So it's out of the way. And then removing those trees around that area so that the fire truck, if necessary, could...
That could be done.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask about is the gate with the walkway over to the park.
Yep.
So is it envisioned that the residents will use that gate access for the park, for that area?
That is the objective, to be able to do that, but that again is a secured gate, and they would not be going on their own. Obviously, they would be going with somebody to assist them.
Right.
That would go there. It's not going to be that an individual could wander, if that's what you're looking for. No, that's not the situation. They would be accompanied to be able to go there, and that's the access for them to go through that way, as well as being able to go out the front, and then if they had to, but this...
You just walk around the block, or walk around the sidewalk, I understand that. I think that and I appreciate that, and I'm thinking about this from a couple of different perspectives.
Sure.
The other perspective is from utilization and the neighbors thinking there's an empty parking lot there, and with a gate that provides access, it just might become overflow lot for people to park in the lot, and then there's gate access there for them to just access the property.
I think, as you heard from Mr. Kroskin, that they have their own operational plan, and that's something that's not going to be allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of how they manage, staff manages, obviously the clientele and their families are well informed, and that's off limits. So and also that is also a secured gate. You cannot come in from that side and gain access through there because the access comes only from the other side.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear about. So what's going to prevent me from parking in that lot and then just using that as a cut-through? The gate, I can't access it.
You cannot access the gate through that way.
That.
You can only access the gate going through the other way. Again, it's a secured gate. It's a locked gate. So, and as any locked gate, whether it's a secured number or whatever, in order for it to get out, and electronically is the only way you can get out, electronically is the only way you can get in.
Mm-hmm. And is that with like a code?
Code or whatever, exactly. That's the way that would work. But again, I think Mr. Kroskin has also indicated that from an operational standpoint,
right,
they have complete control over how their clients and families can use the site.
I mean, with complete control, I'm just trying to think through, you know, the different
Good
different
questions, very good
permutations,
questions.
you know? So are you also someone to ask about the landscaping plan?
That's somebody else, that'll be somebody else.
Somebody else, okay, very
Okay.
good. All right, anyone
Thank
else
you.
have any questions for? No? Yeah. So we have another question over here.
You said this fence would only be 4 feet high. Usually they're 6 feet high, aren't they?
No, this is going to be, actually, I said there's...
No, this one.
It's going to be, that will be a 5-foot high fence. There's options, if you look on the second page, there's different standards between 4, 5, and 6 foot. And we're going to propose a 5-foot fence there.
Okay, and you're going to have the ornamental spikes on top, the left one here?
That's what, we basically, we're just going to have...
That's more attractive than this one.
Fine,
flat one.
fine. It's
And
not
it's-
difficult to add.
I was going to ask about the strength of an aluminum fence, but it says this is extremely durable, because I think occasionally a car might hit it.
It's a commercial-grade fence. Commercial-grade fences are much different than a residential fence, and that's what this is. So the gauge thickness on the aluminum is much heavier.
Okay.
Yep.
It's what?
Is much heavier.
Heavier.
It's much
So
thicker.
this is like they have in front of the Klein
Yep.
parking lot and
Yeah.
in front of Ludlow?
Yep, yep,
Okay.
yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh, Commissioner Corcoran.
I noticed that some of these pictures we have of other facilities are 2 stories rather than 3 stories. Are they the same number of square feet as the proposed?
Many of them are, yes.
They're the same number of square feet?
Many of them are, yes.
Yeah, okay. So is it feasible to do a 2-story building on this property?
No, in this location, it's totally infeasible. We would have loved to have done that. It would have eliminated a lot of the angst. I'm sorry, the answer is no, it's totally infeasible to do a 2-story building at this location. We would have loved to have accommodated the residents. It cost us less money, it would have cost us less heartache, and we would accommodate the community. It's impossible in this location.
Yep.
I'm sorry, for the principal, again, if I could just to understand. When you say impossible, it's because the size of the lot as it is wouldn't allow you to do, say, 80 units? Is that what it is?
80, yes.
83 units?
Yes.
But it's not impossible if it were, say, 58 units, but you're saying, I guess, that economically...
Economically, the cost of these buildings are, we just can't build them because they're concrete and steel buildings. They're made to hospital, non-combustible standards, and then we just wouldn't be able to park it properly.
Okay.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. William Kenny, landscape architect of Fairfield.
Good evening. Bill Kenny, Principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. Since we last met a week ago, we did make some modifications to the planting plan. I have some half-size copies here for you. What we've done is we have added additional evergreen trees to the front of the property. So we do have, again, I'd like to review with you, we have the flowering trees along the street, and the reason we have smaller trees there is the overhead wires, utility lines that line the street. So we have a row of those flowering trees, then we have a row of the shade trees that'll grow to be 80, 100 feet tall over time, similar to the shade trees you have in front of the First Presbyterian Church just up the hill. And then we're on the either end of the building, we've added some additional clusters of evergreen trees. On the south side of the site, we have a few clusters here, and it's mixed within the deciduous trees that we are showing. But we have 3 here, then the gazebo, another spruce tree, the flowering tree, and then 3 more spruce trees on the south end where the building is closest to the road.
Mr. Kenny, what's the height of the proposed evergreen trees?
So just as we have along the northern property line, they'll be 10 to 12 feet tall.
Okay.
And then on the northern end of the property, there are utility lines coming in and out of the site that we had to work around, as well as the sight lines for traffic. So we had to keep them away from the entrances. There's a significant subsurface stormwater recharge chamber in this area of the property. So we do have another cluster of evergreens just to the north of that. So,
Would you have any objection if we were to also make some changes to the ones by the entrances as well, and change those from shade trees to evergreens as well?
which ones are you?
To the right on the entrance.
Yeah, the island.
The
No,
island.
on the outside of the island, right there.
These shade trees here.
Exactly.
We'd have to see what Mr. Galante.
As long as there's sightline visibility.
Well, that's why they would be set back.
There should be a... If I may, Mike Galante, Clark Associates, references sightlines at the driveway. As long as there's adequate sight distance in each direction on Straphill Road, the plantings could be put in. They have to be back far enough from the entrance of the driveway onto the street itself.
How far back?
Typically 15 feet at a minimum. There's a so-called sight triangle we try to keep open at the driveway entrance in order to see up the road several hundred feet.
So the flowering trees that are there now, let's just look at the island, right? So the flowering trees that are there now are sort of set back on the back portion of that. And is the reason that they're flowering so that there's like a
You look under the
window
canopy.
Under the canopy?
Yeah, you need a height of 3.5 feet to see under the canopy up the road.
So those wouldn't be suitable to replace those with evergreens for that reason? Or are they
First reaction is no, you would not want to put evergreens there. You need to keep the driveway open for visibility.
Yep.
And sightlines, which is a
May I-
safety aspect.
Do you have more questions? Or
Yeah.
Can I go ahead?
Commissioner Canelli?
Okay, so in both directions, my understanding is recalling your report, there's significantly more sightline available under the previous planting
Correct.
Arrangement. Does this arrangement that we're seeing here change that at all?
No.
So it's identical?
The only suggestion is if you start putting evergreens in at some point closer to the sidewalk, the new sidewalk,
Right.
then you might block that sightline that's been measured.
Well, let me ask a question of the landscape architect, if I may. Your employer for this project has made clear that economically he can't do it at a smaller size. So for this to work in harmony with this neighborhood, it can't be a cutout like a hotel, at least from my perspective. So I'm wondering if you have available to you, and this may be a lot to ask as a local person, I don't know if you have this, but some sort of CAD modeling software when you do a landscape plan that gives us an idea of what you're going to suggest and show us what it would look like. Do you see what I'm talking about here? Essentially, I need to see, not above, but if I'm living across the street, what this is going to look like with these changes. I also, because as a matter of traffic, I'm actually, Mr. Galante, I didn't really get a chance to say how positive I was about the fact that I thought your presentation on traffic was excellent, and as a runner, I agree with what you're saying about assisted living facilities. So my concern about this project, and why it would be incredibly helpful to me, and maybe even to the community that you want to work with, is some sort of artist's rendering equivalent through CAD software, where you can plug in evergreens, boop, 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 deciduous, boop, 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 sizes. I need to see that. I need to visualize what this is like, because, for example, in the handout we received tonight, the Brighton Gardens of West Orange, New Jersey, and if you have a copy of this, there's some significantly tall trees. I'd like to understand the interaction between where I'm rolling up out of the entrance and the sight lines, and what could be possibly accomplished to shield this building. What I'm not interested in is the building in any way being sort of an advertisement for this facility. I don't want it to know it's there. Part of what is in your packet already is examples of the condominium complex up the hill
Glengarry that does have three-story buildings, but you don't even know it's there. So I guess I'm asking you, could you provide to the commission examples of different levels of evergreen screening in conjunction with, say, a traffic expert to look at, well, what would that mean? Because ultimately, for me, the harmony test is what is critical under 2577. For this to harmonize with the neighborhood, it has to be one that is going to have the least amount of visual impact. So is it possible for you to provide that to the commission as a supplement to us, to see some variations of most possible evergreen shielding, lesser, and all the rest? Can you do that? Is that possible?
Yes. Certainly, we can put together that type of graphic to assist you with your review of this project.
Because I would say to the, and I'm not litigating this here, Mr. Fitzpatrick, but my comfort to support something like this would be a lot higher if I could get a sense visually at ground level of what I'm dealing with. Because one of the things we don't have here, which you often have in projects like this, is artist renderings of what it's going to look like at ground level. We don't have that. So you let me know if that's something that's possible. I have no problem with asking my fellow commissioners to extend the hearing another meeting. It's not the end of the world, to start to get some neighborhood comfort, but also my own comfort to see what this would look like, and that would help a lot.
From my standpoint, Commissioner, it's very important to complete the hearing. It's very important to me to complete the hearing, and if we could do so on a condition of approval basis, or something that we submit, you have it as part of your decision-making session. I'm leaving on Friday for 2 weeks. I run into significant scheduling problems.
You don't have to speak to this anymore. The submission of renderings or minor modifications like this to the landscaping plan, I think, is something that you can submit after the public hearing is closed.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
I'm asking staff. Mr. Wendt, do you agree or disagree?
Well, if it's a supplemental drawing to show what this plan would look like at ground level, I think that would be an acceptable submission, yes.
Okay, but if it does also include perhaps some variations in the types of trees and placement of trees, would that be also? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I don't again want to litigate this in the public hearing, but my only thought here to my colleagues as well who have to decide what is going to, we definitely want a resolution to this. Whether we wait a week, 2 weeks, a month to get this right, if it's possible to get it right, would strike me as something that would first give us a better product, second, heal the community, but more importantly, meet our test on the harmony test of 2577. So I would urge that we see what this would look like at ground level with some examples before we just say, well, yeah, you put in 8 more trees, I'm sure it'll work out.
No, and that's a fair point. I don't believe that this is something that we need to demand and make a rigid pronouncement on, because I do think that the message you're sending is clear, and I think the applicant has the choice, the opportunity. If the applicant would like to submit additional renderings and alternatives, such as Commissioner Kennelly is asking for, then you can ask that the public hearing be kept open for you to be able to do that. If, on the other hand, given your other considerations, which we don't need to discuss here, you would prefer to take all this under advisement and close today, then that's your prerogative. And if you want to take a short recess in order to confer, to figure that out, we can do that too. But I think that's the fairest resolution, because I think that is correct. If it's merely a visual of the plans that are in the record and having been submitted, that's a minor supplemental that is not an issue. But I also don't want to get us into a procedural pickle where we're supplementing the record with additional renderings that are not of plans that are in the record after the public hearing has been closed. I don't think you want that either. But I'm not demanding it either way.
I recognize that, Mr. Chairman. How about we finish our rebuttal and give me a 2-minute break, but let me finish this, please. At this point, I'd like to use Mr. Galante.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening again, Mike Galante, Principal of Frederick Clark Associates, and I'll just be very brief.
I'm listening to you.
I know, but like at home.
Thank you.
Again, Mike Galante, Frederick Clark Associates. I'll just be very brief, just touch on a couple points just for clarification, if necessary. We did a full traffic report July of this year. It went through this full standard process of data collection, traffic volumes, accident analysis, sightline analysis, site traffic projections, and impacts, and so on. Accident data, we collected accident data from the Fairfield Police Department for a 3-year period, which is a requirement, 2013 through 2015. We identified 3 accidents at the park driveway, 3 different types of accidents. One involved a snow event, and 2 that were dry weather conditions. Certainly not a pattern of accidents that of any concern. There was a comment about other accidents. They didn't show up in the accident reports. I would never leave accidents out of a document. So I just want to make that clear. Levels of service, we did the standard analyses. We maintain levels of service at the intersections in certain interstate driveway, in the park driveway, range of A to D, which are standard criteria. Minimal increase in traffic, increase in delay because we have minimal increase in traffic. On that note, increase in traffic in the morning 1.3%, in the afternoon 1.8%, and during the peak hour in the afternoon, I use the word insignificant. It's a fair statement tonight. And then we chatted about sight lines at the driveway. We meet all the standards and supersede those standards based on actual speeds of motors traveling on the road. Landscaping has been designed around that criteria of maintaining adequate and appropriate sight distance, and I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to touch on a few bases, and I see 2 questions.
We have some questions. Commissioner Canale.
Just quickly, because I think there was some confusion. I know you've discussed it before, but can you talk about how you actually, because you were working in the winter, so you didn't have some data about the park, can you explain what you did to make the survey work in real terms?
Yeah, I saw that in one of the emails, and it's, thank you for reminding me. The park was not a busy day. It was in late January, although the weather was good. We added traffic in for the park use, and it's not based on me just picking a number. We added 50 trips to the driveway of the park during the morning and afternoon peak hours, in this case commuter peak hours. It was based on the number of fields and the activities at the fields and the overlapping of games at the field. So it's a combination of traffic inbound and outbound at the driveway.
So essentially, even though you did the work in, I think it was January,
January 27th.
It reflected a springtime level. What you did was essentially insert data that put it more in sync with, say, a springtime level of traffic at the park.
Yes. Okay. We did the exact same thing at Sturgis Park for another project.
Okay.
And I
Commissioner Alessi.
Mr. Galante, talk to me a little bit about trip generations. A few years ago, we did a subdivision off of Fairfield Woods. I think I'm sure you did the traffic study back then, if you remember, the 7-house.
Tully Road.
Right.
Right.
What's the trip generation on an average household in the morning?
A single-family detached home?
Yes.
Anywhere from 0.7 to 0.11 trips per unit during a peak hour for a detached single-family home.
Okay.
So 1 trip.
1 trip.
Yeah.
And the peak hours in the morning?
Yes.
Okay. And what about for a condominium complex?
No age restrictions.
No age
typical
restriction,
condominium.
typical condominium
I think the rate is between 0.45 and up to 0.68 trips per unit during a peak hour.
Morning and afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. That it?
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Norman Benedict of Norman Benedict Associates.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. The methodology which we use is neither creative nor inventive. It's one which has been taught by the Appraisal Institute for over 85 years. It's one which I've been using for over 35 years since I became a member back in the 1980s, and it's one that's currently accepted under the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practices. The simple reality is that it is the best methodology for evaluating what the impact will be of any type of influence on a neighborhood. We used the best available data, comparing examples of properties contiguous to and away from other assisted living centers in the market. The reality is that it presented absolutely no evidence that there was going to be an impact because of the nature of this project. The heterogeneity of how the market exists, the nature of the project and how it fits into the community and all of the other relevant factors directly dictate the reality of the situation. There is no statistical evidence that will have any impact on value.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd like to sum up and conclude. I am not going to repeat the section-by-section regulatory analysis that I did at the first public hearing, but rather address specific issues that have been raised. First is that of height. The first point and the most important point to be made is that the zoning regulations specify the permitted height to be 3 stories or 40 feet, whichever is less. An additional point to be made here is that there's a distinct section of your zoning regulations, specifically 27.4.9, that addresses assisted living and assisted living only. There are not many uses in the zoning regs which have a specific set of regulations. Assisted living does. Reason is that this section was included as a package after a subcommittee of the Zoning Commission examined assisted living, realized it was appropriate to have assisted living regulations, promulgated those regulations. The assisted living height is 3 stories or 40 feet, whichever is less. The proposal here complies with that requirement. The Commission set forth a specific assisted living height requirement. Proposal here complies with it. As an aside, I'd note that to my recollection, the 2 assisted living projects you have approved, Maplewood and Benchmark, I believe both have 3 stories. 3 stories was chosen by the Commission. It's the appropriate standard. We meet it. I'd like to address the issue that there's been no evidence, it was made statements by the public, that there's no evidence of the impact of this use on neighboring property values. Fact of the matter, as you've just heard from Mr. Benedict, he did prepare a lengthy analysis. He submitted it. You've heard his testimony, and his testimony is clear. There is no impact on neighboring properties by construction of an assisted living community. Next issue I'd like to address is that of parking. Again, you have set forth in your regs a specific requirement for assisted living. Assisted living says 0.6 spaces per housing unit. That's a unique figure. There is no 0.6 per anything for any other use. This is specific to assisted living. That standard is met here. As you heard from Mr. Kroskin's testimony, this is actually a higher figure on a per unit basis than Sunrise has utilized in the past in various communities across the country. As you've also heard from Mr. Kroskin, in the event there are unusual parking demands on certain days, this will be dealt by having all employees park off-site and be shuttled. There is no logic that suggests that Sunrise is interested in having visitors have parking problems. It's contrary to good business and good practice, and any unusual parking demands will be dealt with appropriately. Again, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to emphasize this proposal is a true benefit from a conservation standpoint. There's improved water quality. There's a significant reduction of off-site flows. There's a permanent conservation easement over approximately 40% of the site, ensuring that that area remains undisturbed in perpetuity. Again, I'd like to emphasize that in my opinion, this is a use which is in harmony with the neighborhood in that special exception uses are permitted by definition in residential areas. The parcel is an institutional use today and will be replaced by a new institutional use, the new use being one which satisfies a demonstrated need in the community. The land use progression in the area, where you're going from an institutional use as you go south on Stratfield, to a playing field, to multifamily residential, to a gasoline service station, to a bank. It makes perfect sense for this kind of use to be placed in this area. The replacement of an existing special exception use, which use can no longer maintain the property, with another needed special exception use makes for logical, responsible planning. There's no assisted living community on the east side of town. One is needed. To further address the question of need briefly, you'll recall the analysis I handed in shows that even if you just utilize Fairfield County as a benchmark, there are 3.7 units per 100 households of assisted living in Fairfield County. With Benchmark and Maplewood and Sunrise, and the Jewish home, again, relative to 3.7 units for Fairfield County, would be 1.6 units per 100 households, or less than half that which is prevalent across Fairfield County. I'd also like to reiterate that the fire marshal and the fire chief have approved this proposal. Town of Fairfield Engineering has approved this proposal. One other thing that I'd just like to note is I think that Mr. DePeckel of Senior Living Development made a really quite thorough efforts to understand the neighbors' concerns and address them to the extent possible. I realize that clearly not every concern can be addressed, but the number of meetings that the applicant held with interested neighbors in an effort to find a common ground is, in my experience, unique. There was a statement in one of the emails about the experts being bought and paid for. I wrote something that I will skip. This morning, I wouldn't skip it. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd just like to reiterate, I believe the application fully conforms to the regulations, is worthy of the Commission's approval. If the Commission has any further questions, I'd urge them to ask them now. I would ask for a 2-minute recess just so I can confer with my client.
Yes.
Thank you.
Adjourn for 2 minutes. Okay, ready to go? Call the meeting back to order.
Mr. Chairman, we recognize Commissioner Kennelly's point. We recognize the Commission's interest in seeing that kind of viewpoint of the building from various angles that show what the landscaping will look like vis-a-vis the building. We tried to figure a way to split the baby and give you something and then give you the opportunity to modify that as you see fit. I'm afraid the only thing we can do is to effectively continue the public hearing, give you some information ahead of time, and then if there are questions, we can address them. I don't think it's fair to the Commission or my client to bring us back for 2 more full nights because you found a flaw with the landscaping. Let's try to solve it now.
That's not the purpose for continuing the public hearing. And I'll be very, very clear and very specific because I don't want you to submit anything other than a rendering of the plan that you have submitted and a few, well, in your discretion, an alternative or 2 of additional plantings along the frontage and renderings of what that would look like. And I consider these to be minor modifications to the landscaping plan, such that no further public hearing will be required. But I'm holding the hearing open so that you can submit that modification into the record.
And let me clarify, if I might, Mr. Chairman. I will not need any experts here, with the exception of my client and Mr. Kenny, and either me or Mr. Bologna, whoever's here. As far as you're concerned,
absolutely.
There's no more public input.
Everything else is closed.
Understood. Fine. Thank you very much.
All right. I will continue the public hearing and adjourn the meeting.